Berlin Wall's fall remains one of the most significant events of the 20th century, reshaping the political, economic, and social landscape of Europe and the world. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 is one of the most iconic events in world history, symbolizing the end of the Cold War, the collapse of communist regimes in Eastern Europe, and the reunification of Germany. The wall's fall was not an isolated event. It was the culmination of years of political and social upheaval, a product of changing global dynamics, and the result of complex interactions between governments, political leaders, and the people of East and West Germany. This pivotal moment in history reshaped Europe and had profound consequences for the world at large. The roots of the Berlin Wall can be traced back to the end of World War II. After Germany's defeat in 1945, the country was divided into 4 occupation zones controlled by the victorious Allied powers: the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and France. Berlin, the German capital, was similarly divided into 4 sectors, even though it was located deep within the Soviet-controlled zone of East Germany. This division of Germany and Berlin reflected the broader tensions between the Western Allies, who supported a capitalist and democratic system, and the Soviet Union, which imposed a communist regime on the eastern part of the country. In 1949, Germany was officially divided into 2 separate states: the Federal Republic of Germany, West Germany, which was aligned with the Western powers, and the German Democratic Republic, East Germany, which was under Soviet influence and adhered to communist principles. Berlin, though geographically located in East Germany, remained a symbol of the ideological divide between East and West, with the city being split into East Berlin, the capital of the GDR, and West Berlin, which was an enclave of the Federal Republic. The Berlin Wall itself was erected on August 13, 1961, by the government of East Germany, led by Walter Ulbricht under the supervision of Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev. The wall was designed to stop the massive emigration from East Germany to West Germany via Berlin. Between 1949 and 1961, approximately 2.7 million East Germans had fled to the West, seeking better economic opportunities, political freedom, and escape from the repressive regime of the GDR. Many of them used Berlin as a gateway, exploiting the city's status as a divided capital. The construction of the Berlin Wall was an attempt by the East German government to stem the tide of emigration, which threatened the legitimacy of the regime. The wall effectively sealed off West Berlin from East Berlin and the rest of East Germany, physically and ideologically dividing the city and symbolizing the broader division between the communist East and capitalist West during the Cold War. The Berlin Wall's construction was just one chapter in the larger Cold War, the geopolitical and ideological conflict between the Soviet Union and its allies, and the United States and its NATO partners. The Cold War, which began after World War II and lasted for nearly 4 decades, was characterized by a nuclear arms race, proxy wars, and intense political and ideological competition. The Berlin Wall became a focal point of this struggle, representing the stark divide between the communist East and the capitalist West. During the 1960s, the tensions between the superpowers were particularly high, with the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 bringing the world to the brink of nuclear war. Berlin was a flashpoint in the Cold War, with the Soviet Union seeking to extend its influence over the city, while the Western Allies, particularly the United States, were committed to preventing the spread of communism. For nearly 3 decades, the Berlin Wall stood as a powerful symbol of the division of Europe and the ideological split between the Eastern Bloc and the Western world. Over the years, the wall became an international symbol of oppression, drawing attention to the human cost of the Cold War division. It was also the site of numerous escape attempts, many of which ended tragically, as East Germans risked their lives to flee to the west. By the mid-1980s, however, the political landscape was shifting, both in Germany and across Europe. The Soviet Union, under the leadership of Mikhail Gorbachev, was undergoing significant reforms, and the global political climate was changing rapidly. Gorbachev's policy of glasnost, or openness, and perestroika, or restructuring, aimed at addressing the stagnation within the Soviet Union, but they also created new opportunities for reform in Eastern Europe. At the same time, East Germany, like many other Eastern Bloc countries, was facing growing economic difficulties, social unrest, and a rising desire for change among its citizens. In the early 1980s, opposition movements began to grow in East Germany, as they had in Poland with the Solidarity Movement, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. Citizens began demanding more political freedom, and the regime's response was often brutal. One of the most significant developments was the Polish Solidarity Movement, which led to the peaceful overthrow of communism in Poland by 1989. The fall of the Polish government and the subsequent peaceful transitions in Hungary and Czechoslovakia provided a glimmer of hope for the reform-minded citizens of East Germany, who began to demand their own reforms. Mikhail Gorbachev's rise to power in 1985 was a turning point in Soviet history. Gorbachev's vision for reform was markedly different from that of his predecessors, who had maintained a hardline stance on the Eastern Bloc. In contrast to previous Soviet leaders, Gorbachev was willing to tolerate change in Eastern Europe. He did not send Soviet troops to intervene when reform movements arose in countries like Hungary and Poland, marking a sharp departure from the Brezhnev doctrine. Gorbachev's willingness to allow change in Eastern Europe was a critical factor in the fall of the Berlin Wall. As East Germans saw the political tides shifting across the region, their demands for reform grew louder. The East German leadership under Erich Honecker was unable to respond effectively to the mounting pressure, and by 1989, the situation in East Germany was becoming increasingly untenable. The first signs of change in East Germany came in the form of massive protests. Beginning in the spring of 1989, a wave of demonstrations erupted, fueled by dissatisfaction with the regime's economic failures, lack of political freedoms, and the desire for reform. The most significant of these protests took place in Leipzig, where tens of thousands of people gathered every Monday to demand political change. These protests were part of a broader movement for political reform that spread across Eastern Europe. On November 9, 1989, a critical moment in East German history occurred. In response to mounting pressure, the East German government announced that it would ease restrictions on travel to the West, allowing citizens to cross the Berlin Wall and travel to West Germany. However, the announcement was poorly worded, and many people interpreted it as an immediate opening of the wall. A massive crowd of East Germans gathered at the Berlin Wall, demanding to cross into West Berlin. The border guards, unprepared for the crowd and lacking clear instructions, opened the gates, allowing people to cross freely. This moment, which was broadcast live on television, marked the beginning of the end of the Berlin Wall. As East Berliners surged through the wall, jubilant crowds tore it down, symbolizing the collapse of the communist regime in East Germany. The fall of the Berlin Wall triggered a process that would eventually lead to the reunification of Germany. The East German government, facing massive protests and political chaos, resigned, and a new government was formed. The reunification of Germany became the primary goal for both East and West German leaders, and by October 3, 1990, Germany was officially reunified, just under a year after the fall of the wall. The reunification of Germany was a complex process, involving negotiations between the two German states, the United States, the Soviet Union, and other European powers. The reunification was not without its challenges, particularly with regard to the integration of East Germany's economy and the social and cultural differences between the two regions. The legacy of the wall and the division between East and West Germany remained visible for years. But the fall of the wall marked the triumph of democracy and freedom over the oppressive communist regime. The fall of the Berlin Wall was a moment of immense historical significance. It not only symbolized the end of the division of Germany, but also marked the collapse of communist regimes across Eastern Europe. The reunification of Germany was a key event in the larger transformation of Europe after the Cold War, which saw the collapse of the Soviet Union in '91 and the expansion of the European Union and NATO. For the people of East Germany, the fall of the Berlin Wall represented the end of a repressive regime and the beginning of a new era of freedom, democracy, and prosperity. For the citizens of West Germany, it was a moment of triumph as they witnessed the reunification of their country after nearly 40 years of division. The fall of the Berlin Wall remains one of the most powerful symbols of the end of the Cold War and the triumph of democracy over authoritarianism. It continues to inspire movements for freedom and democracy around the world and serves as a reminder of the enduring human desire for unity, peace, and the right to self-determination. In conclusion, the fall of the Berlin Wall was not just the physical destruction of a barrier between East and West Germany. It was a moment that symbolized the collapse of the Soviet-dominated communist bloc and the victory of democratic ideals. It marked the end of a divided Europe and set the stage for the formation of a new Europe, united by shared values of freedom, peace, and cooperation. The Berlin Wall's fall remains one of the most significant events of the 20th century, reshaping the political, economic, and social landscape of Europe and the world. The legacy of the wall's fall continues to inspire generations, a testament to the human spirit's resilience and the enduring pursuit of freedom and unity. Thank you for watching Historical Moments. We hope you enjoyed this trip through history. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories from the past. Until next time, keep exploring the moments that changed history.